Makes Me Want to Holler by Nathan McCall. Chapter 41. Hell. I have forgotten how painful life can be. Now, with my divorce pending, it reminds me that life can be very painful. So painful that it becomes a physical ache, a strange feeling in the heart area that can only be relieved by time. I've weathered some tough storms in my 33 years. This one ranks right up there with the toughest of them. March 11th, 1988. Compared to my divorce, doing time in prison was like a day at the beach. Divorce is hell, pure and simple. A classic example of how screwed up and backward thinking the court system is. More than any other ordeal in my crazy life, my frustrations with the courts during and after my divorce showed me that the folks running the system don't have a clue. Nothing in that process works as it should. Nobody has figured out a way to make divorce fair to all concerned. Some women get shafted beyond belief, while others abuse the system and use the courts to slam dunk their men. Some men abandon their personal duties and skip out, certain that the system can't or won't track them down. Those men who do try to be responsible for their kids often get pushed aside and financially beaten down. It seems in retaliation for those who don't. And children get caught in the middle of all that mess. Divorce. Somebody gets fucked up real bad, no matter which way it goes. Debbie and I had to go through an endless series of hearings and postponements that stretched out for more than a year before the final court appearance. That provided ample time for hostilities between us to simmer and grow. We shared a tension-filled house and nothing more. We slept in the same bed, but barely spoke to each other except to take care of household matters. All the while, Ian and Maya swarmed happily around us, too young to fully understand the depth of the conflict between their parents. Debbie and I knew we couldn't live together anymore, yet neither of us wanted to leave the house. I wanted to stay because it was my house, bought with my money. Debbie said she wanted to stay because she had the kids. Actually, her reason was nobler than mine, but I couldn't see past my anger enough to realize that. Being in the house together created an atmosphere that was volatile and scary at times. One night, when Debbie and I got into an argument, she came charging at me, swinging wildly and banging me with her fists. Ian heard the ruckus and came running from his bedroom into ours. Maya came behind him. Ian started crying, and Maya cried too. Ignoring the children, Debbie kept swinging. I grabbed her wrist to keep her from hitting me, and we both fell onto the bed. She got madder then. As the children screamed, she ran to a phone and called the police. By the time the cops showed up, she calmed down enough to let me convince her to send them away. The incident showed me that Debbie knew her greatest weapon against me was the law. After that run-in, I was sure that if anything funky went down, I'd be back in jail. Whenever I step into a courtroom, for anything, I get flashbacks of the past and see terrifying images of white ghosts sentencing me. I always get ready to bend over because I know I've got it coming. I always think about something we used to say on the block. Be sure to take a jar of Vaseline with you to court, because you're going to get fucked. On the final day of the hearing, I sat in the courtroom with my palms sweating and my head throbbing, furious that I had to go before an old white man to get permission to dissolve a relationship that was already dead. I was mad at everybody, including my lawyer. When I had fallen behind on my legal bills, he stopped working on the case. I went to the bank and got a $5,000 loan to cover the fee, and he got back on the case again. He made it real clear that first and foremost, He was about money. Of course, Debbie's family all came to town and sat in on some of the trial. I looked across the room at my wife and her mother and thought about the irony that the same two people pressing me to get married were now clamoring for my head. They're going to use the system to punish me because I wouldn't get with the program. During one of her trips to the witness stand, Debbie unleashed a bomb that left me nearly floored. She told the judge, "Your Honor, I'm afraid of Nathan. He has been to prison for violence." I was stunned. I considered that the ultimate betrayal. It was clear that she understood racial dynamics well enough to use my prison pass to her benefit. I thought, go on, tip off the judge. Let him know there's a dangerous black man here who needs to be controlled. I sat there and listened as her lawyer used legalese to call me every kind of no-good motherfucker in the book. He did willfully do this, and he maliciously did that. The thing that bothered me most was that they tried to make it appear that I didn't want to support my children. I kept wondering, how can they even suggest that? I got married for the sake of the children. The case was simple to me. Debbie wanted the house and $1,000 a month in child support. I couldn't afford to pay that much, live, and send money for Monroe too. But it didn't seem to matter what I couldn't do. In the end, I got hit with support obligations that I couldn't possibly meet. $500 a month in child support. She got to stay in the house, and I was ordered to pay the mortgage, nearly $700 each month. The total came out to about $1,200 a month, half of my take-home pay. When the judge brought down the gavel, I felt like I'd been sentenced to do time all over again. I was crushed, humiliated. I felt like I was being punished because the marriage didn't work. All I could do was shake my head. One of the few times in my life when I really tried to do what I thought was right, and I get kicked square in the behind. On the way out, I asked my lawyer, what am I supposed to do? Go live in a homeless shelter? What about the costs associated with getting a new place after kicking out all of those legal fees? He said, you've got to pay it or they'll throw you in jail. Then he reminded me that I had to pay him too. I said, but I'm not saying I refuse to pay child support. I'm saying I can't pay that full amount and survive. Isn't there somebody I can talk to explain? No. Then he looked at me and did what lawyers often do. He shrugged his shoulders and said, that's the way it is. That's just the way it is. People in the system say that all the time. Like there's no way in heaven that a thing can be changed because they're locked into an established way of doing that thing. Like they can't bring common sense into the system to correct a proven flaw. That's just the way it is. When I left the courtroom and walked through the shiny halls, I saw Debbie's family down at the elevator, skinning and grinning and congratulating her. Claxton and Chip went with me to help remove my possessions from the house. Chip and I were in the basement gathering things when Claxton appeared at the top of the stairs and called down to me, "Yo, Nate, there's somebody here to see you." I went upstairs and saw two policemen standing in the living room. One of the officers said, "Your ex-wife called and said you're taking things from the house that don't belong to you." Debbie appeared from a back room. The lawman asked her what possessions I was taking that wasn't mine. She pointed to a piece of artwork that I had taken down from the wall. The artwork had been a gift given to me by Chip and his girlfriend before I got married. I dug into my pocket and whipped out a court-approved list of my possessions and showed the lawman that the artwork in question was included on the list. Seeing that, the cop got mad as hell. He turned to Debbie and got on her case hard for needlessly calling the police on me. Why would you do something like this? Don't ever do anything like this again. Debbie looked sheepishly back at him and kept quiet. The scene was pitiful. It was so pathetic that I didn't even get mad. When I looked at Debbie standing there, I saw clearly the extreme she'd go to in order to get at me. I felt ashamed that others saw it too, and that they knew that I had married someone who would stoop so low. The cops left, and for a moment the living room was silent. I stood there, looking disgustingly at the woman who was once my wife. She glared defiantly back at me, and Clax and the Chip looked on, shaking their heads in disbelief. They call it joint custody. What it really meant was that Debbie got the children and I got to visit them every other weekend. I had no say in decisions about where they went to school or in anything else involving their lives. As it turned out, Debbie's parents had more access to Ian and Maya than I did. It was frustrating, and my lawyer kept telling me that there was nothing I could do. That's just the way it is. Even the visitation itself was rife with strains. I never knew what to expect when I went over there, so I'd take Chip along to serve as a witness in case something ugly jumped off. Once, when we got to the house, there was no one home. No note, nothing. I knew Debbie was expecting me because I had just talked to her by phone. After that happened more than once, I filed a contempt action to have the judge force her to comply with the visitation order. We got into court, and when the judge learned that I'd fallen behind with child support payments, he refused to hear my complaint about visitation. I told him I was doing all I could to raise the money needed to catch up. He looked at me coolly and said, "I suggest you file for bankruptcy." The message from the judge was clear to me. The courts view the father mainly as the money source. That's just the way it is. In no time, I got caught in that recurring cycle that body slammed lots of men after divorce. Every time I fell behind on child support payments, Debbie filed an action to take me to court. Every time I went to court, it forced me to spend money on legal fees. The judge would order me to pay her lawyer too. That was money that could have been used to help catch up on support payments. It went round and round like that until I had exhausted all my savings on legal fees and support payments and gone deep into debt. I applied to banks and credit unions and couldn't get another loan. After getting an apartment, I had no money to live on and had to hit up my parents and friends for money. All the while, I kept wondering about life in the fucking system, which just didn't seem to be working for me. I knew it was just a matter of time before I fell so far behind that they'd lock me up for failure to pay child support. Desperate and depressed, I began to think illogically. At one point, I thought about dropping everything, just quitting my job, and going underground to get white folks off my back. None of my domestic problems related directly to my race. Divorce is a universal hell. But when compounded with all my racial stresses, the divorce and its aftermath took a greater toll. My head was messed up so bad that I go for days sometimes without sleep. Even now, 5 years later, I still have occasional problems getting to sleep at night. Sometimes, when I thought about what I was going through, I felt sorry for myself and wondered why I seemed to spend most of my life catching hell. I think maybe this is God's way of paying me back for all the hurt and pain I've dished out to other folks. Maybe I need to accept it as divine justice and quietly take my lumps. At other times, I looked at it another way, that the anguish was the price I had to pay to be able to live for myself and face the world, that 2 of my children could say that their parents had been married, no matter how brief or ugly that union had been. Every now and then, I ran across other dudes who'd been through the same hell as me. We spent hours comparing notes and sharing horror tales. Every one of them had a piece of divorce-related advice to give. Sometimes they said things I needed to hear, like the one friend who told me, no matter what goes down, take the high road. It's important that you be able to look back on this and feel good about the way you handled yourself. Sometimes cats told me things I didn't need to hear, like the tale about a guy who took matters in his own hand when his wife wouldn't let him see his children and the courts refused to do anything to enforce his rights. He knocked that bitch's front teeth out, a friend told me. He got 30 days in jail for it, but you know what? Every time he goes around there to get his children now, she hands them over and don't give him no problems. Those rap sessions carried a lot of weight with me and sometimes affected what I thought and did. I decided that I wanted to do what was right, take the high road, but the notion of knocking out Debbie's teeth also carried some appeal for me. One day, I went to the house to try to talk with her about calling a truce so that we could stop making lawyers rich. As I sat on the couch, she stood over me, ranting. She went off, blah, 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 blah. I sat there quietly listening. Suddenly, I couldn't make out what she was saying anymore. Her lips moved and her arms flailed, but I couldn't hear. Without being aware, I had slipped into a zone. I've been in that zone before. I went into it just moments before I shot Plaz. It's a semi-conscious state where nothing gets absorbed and all logic and reason shuts down for the night. I looked at Debbie and thought about all the anxiety she put me through. I thought about the incompetent court system and how it seemed that nobody cared about what was happening to me. I thought about taking the high road, then about the cat who knocked that bitch's front teeth out. Something inside me said, yeah, knock her front teeth out. You can do 30 days in jail standing on your head. That familiar tightness formed in my chest, that flight or fight feeling that used to come over me in the old days on the streets. I felt it rising, like vomit, just before it convulses you and forces its way up out of your mouth. I felt myself about to leap up and punch her in the face. I felt it coming over me and I got scared. I knew that if I got up from that couch and took one swing, it would get good to me and I wouldn't stop. I wouldn't stop until I was completely exhausted or until my ex-wife was stone cold dead. As I sat there mute, the voices of divorce veterans kept whispering, competing for control. Knock that bitch's front teeth out. No, take the high road. I recently read an article about the benefits of counseling. Written by a psychologist, the article said that people don't realize they have to take care of their mental health in the same way they tend to their physical health. The writer said people routinely go to doctors for physical checkups, even when they know there's nothing wrong with them. People should go to counselors, he said, for mental checkups. That made all the sense in the world to me. I thought about that article as I sat there contemplating whether or not to attack my ex-wife. I decided then and there that I needed counseling. I got up from the couch and walked out the door without saying anything, leaving Debbie still in the living room raising hell. The next day, I contacted a counselor and went in for therapy. The counselor was a white woman. She seemed to understand right away what I was going through, seeing how hyped and uptight I was. She prescribed some medication to chill me out. She also gave me her beeper number and said, now listen, I want you to put this number in your wallet and keep it with you at all times. I don't care where you are. If that feeling ever comes over you again, call this number and talk to me. It was comforting to know I had someone to call if I needed advice. That, more than anything, helped me eliminate thoughts about turning violent again. I came close to the edge once or twice after that, but each time, the assurance that I had someone to turn to was enough to calm me. The counselor didn't know it, but she probably saved Debbie's life. I've come to believe that there's a higher force looking out for me, and it moves on my behalf, right on time. Early in 1989, I got another call from the Washington Post. As Milton Coleman promised, they kept an eye on me. They called to invite me back for another job interview. They had an opening on their city hall staff and wanted to know if I was interested. After more than 6 years in Atlanta, I knew it was time to move on. I also knew I had to escape a domestic situation that was bringing me down. I went to the post interview feeling confident that I reached a point that 2 years earlier, Milton Coleman had told me about. I had done enough in my career to overshadow my prison past. I had built a track record. I interviewed with the usual battery of people and found it easy to talk about the embarrassment that had occurred in 1987. For the final interview, I was ushered into a large office in the back of the newsroom where Ben Bradley, the paper's famous executive editor, sat behind a desk talking to Leonard Downey, the managing editor. We talked about a lot of things and finally got around to discussing the flapper 2 years earlier when they found out about my prison record. Speaking in his raspy voice, Bradley asked, "Why didn't you tell us?" I told him about my experience in Louisville, where I thought I lost a job because I came clean. I vowed after that before I told anyone else about my past, I'd first get a foot in the door to prove myself. Bradley said, "Did Bill Kovac know this about your prison record?" I said, "Yes, I told him." "What did he say?" Kovac said he didn't care about that. He told me that if anybody gave him a hard time about my prison record to let them know. Bradley smiled, looked at Donnie, nodded, and said, "Good for Bill." I knew then I had the job. Okay, that brings us to the end of the chapter, Hell. And one of the first things I want you guys to think about is that what goes around comes around. The energy that you put out eventually is going to come back to you in some way. So, I think about all the trains that Nathan McCall and his friends ran on girls back in the day. And to me, this divorce and this whole relationship sounds like this is just some karma, like the cause and effect of him doing those women dirty and getting in a relationship with a woman or marrying a woman he didn't really like or love. That's something of note to keep in mind and to practice. You shouldn't have babies with people that you don't love, because that person is going to be in your life for the rest of your life, for the rest of your children's lives at least. But another good point to pull out of this book, out of this chapter, is that storms come, and there will always be some troubles either on the horizon or troubles that you just got through going to, or troubles that you just got done going through, But there's always like some good that can come into your life as well. So while Nathan McCall is dealing with this situation with his wife, his divorce, he gets a call from his old boss who wants him to come back and work for that paper. And you know what? That's not even his boss. It's just a job that he interviewed for that he didn't get the first time around. But now they're calling him back. Things will eventually work out in your favor, but you just may have to go through some trials and tribulations before you get there. But anyway, getting with the wrong woman or ladies getting with the wrong man, it's going to put you at the hands of the court system when you try to get a divorce. It's just not that simple. But anyway, I'll see you guys in the next chapter. Please like and share this to people that you think will enjoy it, or just share it to your timeline. And then, as always, click that link in my bio to get my ebook. And I'll holler at you guys in the next chapter. Peace.